Hello friends, today I'm going to talk about entrepreneurs, how entrepreneurship is important in the Indian context. After listening to my talk on entrepreneurship, you will be able to know who an entrepreneur is, how an entrepreneur is different from a businessman, what is the entrepreneurial history in general, and what has been the entrepreneurial history in India in particular. You see, a question which is asked quite frequently by various economists and researchers interested in the field of entrepreneurship is as to who is an entrepreneur. But you will be, quite perplexed to know that till this day, no concise and universally accepted definition of this term has emerged. For the past several years, this concept has been investigated and studied by researchers from various disciplines such as economics, psychology, commerce and sociology. And each researcher, after completing his or her study, has come out with his/her own definition of the term entrepreneur. Many times, their view differ from that of their predecessors, and sometimes they match and complement the ideas expressed about the subject by them. In the following contexts, I will be discussing the origin of the term entrepreneur, its history, and later on talk about the relationship between business and entrepreneur. Now let me take you to the history of entrepreneurship, basically to the origin of the term entrepreneur. You can get a whole lot of idea about the history of entrepreneur from the books written by Mark Dollinger, Robert Hisrich and Michael Peters in their book on entrepreneurship. Let me first take up the earliest period to the 18th century. So first and foremost, let me talk about the earliest period. You see, entrepreneurship and wealth have always been, together. So in every period, we would see that the people who used to own wealth were basically entrepreneurial. So let's see what happened in the earliest period and who were the people who were called entrepreneurs. You see, entrepreneurship has existed throughout history. But the one existed in the past was quite different from the entrepreneurship of today. In earlier times, entrepreneurs did not do business. So this is something which is quite surprising for many of you. They were involved in other forms of wealth creation. For example, in ancient Rome, there were three modes of wealth creation: landholding, usury, and political payment. And these forms of wealth creation were practiced by the ruling elite, the noblemen, the kings. So the commercial entrepreneurship or business, which we basically correlate entrepreneurs as, was carried out by ex-slaves. So trade was existing, trade was very much there, but that was practiced by the slaves or the ex-slaves, but not by the noblemen or the kings who were basically the wealth holders. Similarly, in China, wealth was possessed by the monarch, the king, and the mandarins. Mandarins were the bureaucrats who ran China, who ran the government of China. So you see, in the earliest period, it were the kings and the noblemen who were basically called entrepreneurs. Now let's come to the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, the entrepreneurs were people who were musicians and artists. So these were the people who basically held a lot of wealth. So they organized musical and other entertainments, and the word entrepreneurship was described for both actors as well as people who managed large production projects. So these were basically the artists who were rich people and who were called entrepreneurs. Now let's come to the 16th century. In this period, wealth was obtained through military success. So these were the people who were soldiers, who were conquerors, who basically amassed land. They went to other foreign lands and conquered those kings and those land and amassed lots of wealth. So these were the people who were entrepreneurs. Therefore, during this period, the word entrepreneur was applied to individuals engaged in military. They were the soldiers and conquerors who fought battles and occupied foreign land. Now let me come to the 17th century. In the 17th century, the term entrepreneur was used for architects and engineers. It extended to cover construction and other civil engineering activities. So these were the people who were basically engineers, scientists, architects, who were people with education, and they used their innovative intellect and innovative intelligent faculty in order to amass wealth. So these were the architects and engineers who earned high return for designing and constructing cathedrals, castles, palaces and bridges. So during this time, lots of cathedrals and dams and bridges were built by these people, and these were the people who actually held a lot of wealth. Now coming to the 18th century, now we will come to the real term entrepreneur. Now let's see who evolved this term. In this period, it is a general belief that Richard Cantillon, an Irishman living in France and a banker by profession, was the first who introduced the term entrepreneur in the 18th century. Now the word entrepreneur was derived from the French verb entreprendre, which meant to undertake. Now, what did he mean by the term undertake? According to him, entrepreneurs were people who undertook risks. So, according to him, entrepreneurs were people who were risk takers and who were ready to take up risks. So, also he said that an entrepreneur was an agent who bought factors of production at certain prices in order to combine them into a product with a view to selling it at uncertain prices in future. So, hats off to Richard Cantillon. Had he not been there, I think the word entrepreneur would not have existed today. Now I'll tell you what happened in the 19th century and thereafter. What was the entrepreneurial journey thereafter? It is in this period that entrepreneurs were viewed from a commercial perspective. You see, today we know entrepreneurs only commercially. We find people like Tatas, Birlas, Ambanis, and we consider them entrepreneurs. So it was during this period that actually entrepreneurs got the authenticity of commercial people who are earning money through trade. So in the year 1803, a French economist by the name of JBC expanded Cantillon's ideas and conceptualized the entrepreneur as an organizer of a business firm. He defined entrepreneur as the economic agent who unites all means of production, land of one, the labor of another, and the capital of yet another, and thus produces a product. And by selling the product in the market, he pays rent of land, wages to labor, interest on capital, and what remains is his profit. So you see, the idea of today's entrepreneur was basically coined by JBC. Now let's come to various other entrepreneurial definitions given by various economists. In the year 1876, another economist by the name of Francis A. Walker came out with a new concept of an entrepreneur. According to him, a true entrepreneur is one who is endowed with more than average capacities in the task of organizing and coordinating the various other factors of production. So how one entrepreneur coordinates or organizes factors of production may differ from another entrepreneur, and that's how one is different from others. Now, another economist by the name of Frank H. Knight in the year 1921 expressed his views about the term entrepreneur. He described entrepreneur as specialized group of persons who bear uncertainty. Unlike risk, uncertainty is a risk which cannot be insured against and is incalculable. I think this is something which is very, very important, because generally we say that entrepreneurs are people who take risks. But you see, he basically said that risk and uncertainty has to be distinguished. They are two different separate things, because risk is something which is calculable, like what our insurance agents often do or our insurance companies does. They insure us against risks. So risks are something which can be calculated and which can be insured. But uncertainty is something which cannot be calculated and which cannot be insured. So according to him, entrepreneurs are people who take who take up businesses or who take up some kind of entrepreneurial ventures which has a lot of uncertainty. Now coming to another economist, and who is quite popular, he was basically the man whom we all associate with Entrepreneurial Definition. He is Joseph Eloy Schumpeter. He was a German, and he, for the very first time in the year 1934, assigned a very crucial role of innovation to the entrepreneur. And mostly, if anybody asks us who is an entrepreneur, and we just spring up with this answer that an entrepreneur is a person who innovates. So it was Joseph Schumpeter who coined the term entrepreneur with reference to innovation. Now, according to Schumpeter, an entrepreneur is an innovator who brings economic development through new combinations of factors of production. Now, let's see how this combination happens. So, the new combinations of factors of production, according to Schumpeter, may occur in any of the following 5 forms. Now, let's see what are those 5 forms. Number 1. An entrepreneur is a person who might introduce a new product in the market. So, if a person introduces a new product in the market, we call him an entrepreneur. The second one, the entrepreneur might introduce a new production technology. You see, most of us have seen that, in our past history, people used to make things by hand. Now, you see, things are the same, but then instead of hand, now machines have taken, their role, and now we find the same things made by machines. So you see, the product is the same, but the technology has shifted, it's changed. So a person who brought a new technology to manufacture something, that person again is an entrepreneur. Now let's take up the third form. The third is opening of a new market. So an entrepreneur, he may not come out with a new product, he may not have come out with a new production technology, but even if he has found a new market, you see, that again is entrepreneurial. Now the fourth one is the discovery of a new source of supply of raw material. You see, we all have cars. Earlier only petrol was used or diesel was used, but now CNG gas is being used. So you see, the raw material which we are using for traveling is no longer petrol and diesel. Now CNG gas is also there. So you see, a new kind of raw material has been supplied. So that is also entrepreneurial. Now the fifth one, which is again what entrepreneurs do, they might come up with a new form of organization. So this again, like we have, we always had, let's say, companies, we always had partnership, but now we have LLP, which is limited liability partnership. Now this is a new form of organization. So anybody who comes out with a new form of organization also is called an entrepreneur. Now let's move on to other examples of the definition of the term entrepreneur given by various other economists. Now let me state another economist by the name of E. Hagen. In the year 1958, E. Hagen defined entrepreneur as an economic man who tries to maximize his profits by innovations. Innovations, according to him, involve problem solving, and the entrepreneur gets satisfaction from using his capabilities in attacking these problems. So according to him, an entrepreneur is a person who tries to solve problems and tries to find solution to those problems. Another economist by the name of Peter Drucker in the year 1964 defined an entrepreneur as one who always searches for change. He responds to these changes and exploits them as an opportunity. According to him, innovation is the specific tool of entrepreneurs, the means by which they exploit changes as an opportunity for a different business or a different service. So again, Peter Drucker somehow has again stressed on the term innovation. Now coming to a more modern definition of the term entrepreneur, this was given by Robert D. Hisrich. In the year 1986, he defined entrepreneurship as a process of creating something different with value by devoting the necessary time and effort, assuming the accompanying financial, psychic and social risks and receiving the resulting rewards of monetary and personal satisfaction and independence. So I think he has given a more holistic, a more comprehensive definition of the term entrepreneur. Alright, I have just talked about the entrepreneurial history in general, but now I'll be telling you about the entrepreneurial history of India in particular, that is how entrepreneurship has evolved over the years, over the period in India. You see, the entrepreneurial history of India is seen in the context of her economic history. In India, the village community was the scene of economic activity. There was an elaborate caste-based division of work. We know that very well, that our society was divided into 4 castes. We had the Brahmins, we had the Kshatriyas, we had the Banyas and we had the Shudras. The Brahmins were basically given the task of education. The Kshatriyas were given the task of warriors to keep us safe, secure. The Kshatriyas were basically the people given the task of doing trade. And Shudras were given the task of keeping the sanitation and the cleanliness of the society. So you see, these were the 4 divisions of caste which was there existing in India, which prevailed for quite some time, and even today to an extent it is there in India, in some parts of India. You see, the Banya caste or the Vaishya caste was basically given the task of doing trade, and they were the people whom we basically connect with the term entrepreneur. So the Hindu society was conceived as homo hierarchious, where caste groups were rigidly separated from each other on functional basis. And among them, as I said, the Banya was a caste which mainly dealt in commodities and carried on a money lending business. They were the most urbanized section of the society, even though in the caste hierarchy they came 3rd after the Brahmins and Kshatriyas. Now, in a book written by R.A. Sharma, we would find a detailed analysis of the entrepreneurial history of India. But according to him, during the 17th century, there were a number of entrepreneurs in major trading areas in the Indus River Valley of the northwestern India, which much of it is now in Pakistan, in the northeastern India around the river Ganga and its tributaries, and in southern India's coastal areas who were engaged in foreign trade. So these were the 2 areas where we found, traders or the people in India who did business. In ancient times, Indian entrepreneurs were famous world over for handicraft industry. As I've already mentioned that, earlier we always used handmade things, so machines were not existing. And in ancient India particularly, Indian handicraft was very much, famous world over. The old cities like the Benares, Allahabad and Mirzapur were famous for textile industry. So Benares is still, it's one of the olden cities of India, and Allahabad too. In the 18th century, Indian merchants dealt with European companies. So suddenly in the 18th century things changed. We could see East India Company coming to India, and suddenly the Indian merchants started dealing with European companies. They were involved as financiers in changing money and providing bills of exchange. Since 1850s, Indian industrial and financial entrepreneurs became involved, especially in Western India, and were instrumental in the substantial progress in modern manufacturing during the last half of the 19th century. So we suddenly see the emergence of industries and modern technology and machines. During the same time, Indian handicrafts declined as a result of machine-made goods and the disappearance of the patronage of princely courts. So till then, we could see that it were the kings who basically provided all the infrastructure and the platform for trade. And suddenly, we found all these things now disappearing. The patronage given by the state was disappearing, and handicrafts as a result had faced a lot of decline. The East India Company introduced changes in the Indian economy by exporting raw materials and importing finished goods to India. Now this was a big problem which the Indian traders faced, because earlier it were the finished goods in the form of handicrafts, even spices in the south. If we go down to the south of India, we find that spices was a big export product which used to be exported to the Arab world, and India was quite flourishing. It had a very flourishing trade in the south because of spices. But suddenly, because of the East India Company and the influence of this company, we saw a drastic change in our trade. From finished goods, we were now exporting raw material and rather importing finished goods. So it was not very good for our Indian industry and for our Indian trade. Now let's move on. By the middle of the 19th century, India had a developed business community. Gujarat was the most urbanized and developed, and we all know Gujus are very famous entrepreneurs. We find Gujarati community almost everywhere in the world, whether it be America, whether it be Europe, England, anywhere we find Gujarati community quite entrepreneurial, and they are good in business. In Gujarat, it had a highly developed Banya community, both Hindu and Jain, and also large Muslim trading community. These Muslim trading communities were the Bohras, Khojas and Kachi Memons. Parsi, who migrated from Persia to Gujarat in the 8th century, became prominent shipbuilders and set up merchant houses in Bombay, Burma, China and London. So apart from the Gujaratis, we also found Parsis coming to India in the 8th century, and we see them quite entrepreneurial. They did establish a lot of business houses in India. Among the trading castes of South India were the Chettis, which were subdivided into various groups such as the Telugu Kumatis, the Tamil Nattukotai, Chettis, Berry Chettis, etc. On the west coast of South Kerala, most of the trade was in the hands of Syrian Christians, who were called Nazrani Mappilas, and the Mohammedan merchants known as Moplas. In Bengal, the communities like the Subarnabaniks specialized in trade and commerce. Another business community which is quite famous are called the Marwadis. I think the best example of Marwadis is that of Birlas, who hailed from Marwad in Rajasthan, the trading and money lending castes who attained their greatest development in Gujarat and Rajasthan. Later, they spread their commercial activities to Bombay and Calcutta. In Odisha, the Vaishya trader community engaged in trade and business were constituted by the traditional Shrestris and Banik Santha. Now, the very first textile mill, which was set up in 1854 at Bombay, was by a Parsi gentleman named Kovasji Nanabhoy Davar. In 1855, the first jute mill came into existence in Rishra, a few miles above Calcutta, by an Englishman named George Eckland. The British developed coal mining, tea plantation and jute manufacturing industries. JRD Tata was the first Parsi entrepreneur who established the first steel industry in Jamshedpur in 1911. Just in continuation of this, I would just like to mention an example of JRD Tata, who was a Parsi and who continued the tradition, the family tradition of their business Tata Group. You see, JRD Tata was an entrepreneur par excellence and was the pioneer industrialist who joined Tata and Sons in the year 1925. Many of you are not aware that, you see, Air India, which we travel more often nowadays, was actually not that of Government of India, but it actually belonged to the Tatas. And this was built, you see, JRD Tata, he built Tata Airlines in the year 1929 and launched Air India International as India's first international airline in the year 1948. And many of you are not aware, but you see, JRD Tata was also a pilot. He did a pilot training and he could easily fly an aircraft. In 1956, he started a program called closer employee association with management in order to build a healthy relationship with employee and management, and also to have the employee say in the affairs of the company. This was the very first time a company took a move in employee management good relationship. And you see, Tata even today is quite renowned for their philanthropy and for their good heart for the employees. They always keep the employees on top whenever they think about the company's goals. So they feel that employee welfare is the primary objective of management, and without the employee cooperation and without employee involvement in management, say, a company cannot progress. So this, I think, this credit definitely goes to JRD Tata. He believed in employee welfare and brought various schemes like 8 hours of working a day. You see, nowadays you cannot work more than 8 hours a day. If you work, you have to get bonus for it, extra time, you know. So this concept was actually introduced by JRD Tata. Then things like employee provident fund scheme, medical aid and accident compensation and various other schemes, these were all introduced by JRD Tata. JRD Tata was also the founder of TCS. You see, TCS is again a very renowned company. It's now a multinational. It has operations all over the world, and companies like Tata Motors, Titan and Tata Tea. He was a man who not only grew his own company but also helped in the growth of the nation. So you see, it is not just an entrepreneur who builds his own company, but an entrepreneur also helps in the development of a nation. Alright, now let's move on. Let's go further. You see, according to R.A. Sharma, the Second World War provided stimulus to the growth of Indian industries. A number of industries like cement, paper, cotton, textiles, iron and steel, sugar, etc. came into existence. They had expanded their capacity to quite a large extent. In post-independent India, a new community of entrepreneurs emerged. They were the Brahmins in the south, Patels in Gujarat, Baniyas in Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh, Bohra, Muslims and Lohanas in Gujarat, Jain, Baniyas and Marathas in Maharashtra, Sikhs and Brahmins in Punjab, Kayasthas, Baidyas and Subarnabaniks in Bengal, Sindhi Hindus, Oriya Brahmins, Kayasthas and Kashmiri Brahmins in Uttar Pradesh, Jains and Jats of Delhi and Rajputs of North India. You see, there was another community which we all are quite aware of, and these are the Sikh community. You see, after partition, there are so many Sikhs fled from Pakistan and came to Delhi, especially in Delhi and the other parts of North India. They were derooted from their home. They had nothing with them. They had no means of livelihood. So these Sikhs who basically came, and other non-Sikhs who came from Pakistan to India, had nothing in their hands and nothing for their livelihood. So these people started entrepreneurship, and these were the entrepreneurs who today are working at a very large scale. They are pretty good in Delhi and in other parts of India. So you see, these people were not entrepreneurs, but it was their condition, the circumstances forced them to become entrepreneurs. So this was again a new breed of entrepreneurs who emerged. These were the people who came after partition to India. So these were the new breed of people in Delhi and other parts of the northern part of India who became entrepreneurs. Now, the policy of encouraging small-scale industries provided seedbed for the emergence of manufacturing entrepreneurs in India, that is in the post-independence, and many existing and well-established business houses decided to diversify and take to new industrial activity. As a result, the family of entrepreneurship units, especially that of Tata, Birla, Ambani, grew to immense size. Now let me tell you how entrepreneurship and business opportunity are linked. You see, from my past talk, you must have seen that an entrepreneur may be an innovator, he may be a risk taker, organizer, one who bears uncertainty, or a change agent who exploits opportunities. There are innumerable definitions of the term entrepreneur. From the earliest period to the 18th century, we have seen that entrepreneurs were the bureaucrats, conquerors, musicians, actors, architects, and engineers. It was only from the 19th century that traders and businessmen were identified as entrepreneurs. Hence, the word entrepreneur is not the same as a businessman, which I'm sure you're all now quite good at accepting. Entrepreneurs are found in all professions such as medicine, engineering, research, architecture, etc. On the other hand, a businessman is one who is engaged only in business. This is a commercial activity which is solely done to earn profits. Hence, a commercial entrepreneur is one who finds business opportunities and makes profits by exploiting those opportunities. So, after this lecture, I am sure you all can now easily define who an entrepreneur is, and you can easily identify the role of an entrepreneur in any nation or the world over, how entrepreneurship helps a country to develop. Thank you.